everybody, welcome to, yes, you guessed it, yet another video. So today we're doing it's a Honda tank cover or tank fairing, whatever you want to call it. A lot of modern bikes don't have a physical tank. They have a plastic tank normally with a plastic fairing or shroud over the top of it. This is some stuff I did for somebody. It's actually a race bike, so there's other stuff that will go on it, but we're putting the decals on, which is just a HRC logo and just a couple of Honda logos on it. And we're using the Meiji Finer Force. Now we're using the Type C. Now I have actually got the whole range. Yeah, I know, lucky me. So there is a B, a T, an R, a C, and a WB. Now, the WB we can exclude really. It's designed for waterborne paints, but it's an absolute cannon if you want a really fast gun. But it's a 2mm tip, and a lot of people are put off by that. But I sprayed clear coat with it. I've sprayed base coat with it. And it works really, really well, but it is extremely fast for what is essentially a Midi gun. These are Midi guns. They're not mini, they're bigger than a mini, but they're not quite full-size guns. So looking at the T, which is the version we're trying today, most of the guns in this range are designed to run at about 2 bar, and that's what I run this at, 2 bar, so 29 PSI. And it seems to sit absolutely fine with that. The only one that's different is the Type C, which again I have got, and I'm sure I've done a review of it. I'll try and remember to put a link in the description, but if not, just search for my videos and you should find it. But the Type C runs at 1.5 bar, so it runs around about about 22 PSI, something like that. So yeah, 21, 22 PSI. So it runs at a lower pressure. But most of them, as I say, run at 2 bar, and this thing seems to run perfectly happy at 2 bar. Now, I know a lot of people, when they talk about the Finer Force, are quite thrown by the fact that there are so many of them. So we give you a little rundown of what Meiji actually say the guns are for. The Finer Force Type B is a 1.6 tip, and that's designed to be a base coat, a clear coat gun. So you would expect it to flow more, which it does with a 1.6 tip. Meiji quote something like 185 litres per minute. Not litres, milliliter. It would be a cannon if it was litres, millilitres per minute of flow. So quite a bit, but as you'd expect, it's a 1.6 tip. So it's quite a good fiery gun. Now the rest of the guns in the range are all 1.4. So you have the Type R, which is, Meiji call that the best all-rounder. Although I would actually, I would dispute it slightly in that it's probably the best all-rounder for the experienced painter. But I think the T is better, which we'll go on to in a minute, because that's obviously what this video is actually about. So the R is described by Meiji as being the best all-rounder. The output of that is about 165 millilitres per minute. So it's less than the 1.6 as you would expect really. It's designed to run at 2 bar, 29 PSI. And then you also have the Type C, which is also a 1.4. That's the one that I was telling you about, runs at 1.5 bar. Now, yeah, 1.5 bar, so about 21 PSI, something like that. Initially, when I got that, I was a little bit disappointed with that, but I realised I had to slow up, and you just have to take things easier because it's running at a lower pressure. You get obviously the added benefits of guns that run at lower pressure, which is normally less overspray. As far as the actual air consumption, it wasn't any different. Although the pressure was less, it wasn't any different. And that's because the air holes are slightly bigger. I mean, it does differ slightly, but not by loads. I think you'll find they're all within about 2 CFM of each other. But if you want the least air consumption, it is the Type C, because it runs at 1.5 bar effectively. But compared to the Type T, which is the gun we're reviewing in this video, and yes, I will get onto it, it's not actually much different at all. As far as I know, it's about 7.5 CFM, I think they'd say, for the Type T. I would have thought it was less than that, to be honest. It doesn't seem to use loads of air, but it certainly is more than things like the DeVilbiss Pro Light S with a TE5 and even HV5 cap. It is a step on from those, but it is, as I said, a Midi gun, not a mini gun. So you'll find that you'll get jobs done quicker. So don't worry too much about the air consumption, as long as you've got a reasonable sized compressor. So going on to the Type T, and the reason why I think it's actually a good all-rounder for the slower painter. So somebody that's new to painting that wants a good quality gun, and I don't think you will find any better made guns than the Meiji Finer Force. Even the Finer Core, I don't think is as well made as the Finer Force. I mean, there's not much in it, to be fair, but it's got a superb finish to the actual gun. So the Type T is described by Meiji as being ideal for metallic colours and pearls and things like that. It gives very fine atomization. It doesn't actually flow a load of material. Of all the Finer Force guns, it actually, according to Meiji, it has the lowest paint volume. It's something like 130 millilitres per minute. So as you can see, it's not going to set the world on fire. But what I think it does, when used with a good quality clear coat, although we didn't actually use a particularly good quality clear coat on this one, but it did work very, very well. But it's capable of superb finishes. It really has got fine atomization, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do a video of it with using clear coat, basically, which is not particularly what Meiji recommend for. As I say, if you want an all-rounder, they recommend the Type R, or if you want purely a base coat gun, then you go for the B. But with the T, what I think it does do is it gives you loads of control over what you're doing. And as I said before, the atomization is really, really fine. So you get a superb finish straight off the gun. As per usual with all these videos, the finish we get is the finish we get off the gun. I try and point out a bit, if I remember rightly, I've got on my notes here, there was 3 quite large nibs, and they all came at the same time at the same spot. And I know what it is. My workshop is surrounded by, there's quite a lot of greenery around my workshop, and there's some ferns not too far away. And when they winter, they drop all their little half moon shapes, I would suppose you would call them, that ferns drop, and they tend to get stuck in the eaves. And then sometimes, if it's a bit windy, you'll get a bit of wind and it will blow these things down, which is really annoying. It's because I've got it's like a corrugated top to the garage. It doesn't happen often, so it's not a huge problem. And what I tend to do at the end of winter or the start of spring, I tend to give all the eaves a good blowout and a good clear up, so that it cuts the chances of it down. But that's what happened in this case anyway. But obviously that's not a fault of the gun, it's just a fault of me and my conditions. So again, apologies to the people who watch all the videos, but I will quickly run through it. I do heat the clear coat up in a microwave, and I'm sure it's not the thing to do, so don't do it at home. But it does work really well. There'll be a link on in the description as to how well it actually works. It does make the clear coat flow out, and that's borne out by the results I get, because the clear coat used in this video was a U-Pol 2081, which does flow a bit better, I found, than the 2080, but neither of them are known for, you know, particularly flowing out really well. The temperature was 18 degrees Celsius, so what's that in Fahrenheit? About, what's that, 68, something like that, 68, 69, something like that. So it wasn't a particularly cold day, but it wasn't particularly warm anyway. This was actually last year I did this video. You'll see these as various fairing components and tank components crop up in videos now and again, because being track stuff, you sort of like have a few sets of each, and they get marked, scratched, different decals put on, taken off, etc. So, you know, I do a few of them and quite enjoy doing it, just because, you know, I know someone really, that's all. Anyway, so back to the Type T. All these guns take a 1/4 inch side cup, so you can get a huge range of cups. You can get PPS adapters for them. I'm not actually sure of what the number is off my head, but you can get PPS adapters for them. I got these guns from Painting Tools Japan, so I'll put a link in the description. I do often mention them. I do pay for the guns, so I'm not giving them in any way. So I'll put a link in the description. And they can supply adapters as well. There is a UK importer which imports some of the Meiji stuff, and they do import the Meiji Finer Force. Although I think they only bring in the Type C, but I'm not sure. That may have changed. But I'll put a link in the description to them anyway. It's BSS Solutions, so Beyond Surface Solutions. So BSS, basically, not BSS Solutions. I'll put a link in the description anyway, and hopefully to the Meiji.co.uk website, which is the website they run. And if you need anything, just give them a ring and they can sort you out. I'm sure they can. I've never actually got one from them, but I'm sure they can sort you out. One of the things that crops up quite a bit recently, actually, talking about MIDI-sized guns, a lot of people are contacting me with, will the gun that I've won or have seen work with my compressor? Now, most of the time it is lesser quality guns, so some of the cheap Chinese guns, and by that I mean the sort of, the 50, 60 US dollar guns on AliExpress and things like that. Will it work with my compressor? And the answer to that is often no, because they've got quite small compressors with quite small tanks. The size of the compressor you need for a gun is dependent on a few things. It's dependent on the storage tank that's in the compressor. So if you've got a 200 litre, so what's that, 4.5 divided by 200, what's that, about 60, 70 gallon tank, and you want to do 2 fenders or a bike tank and one fairing or something like that, you're going to have ample air supply for whatever gun you want, really, because you're not using it long enough. And normally when you get a bigger gun, you will cover a bigger area quicker, so the compressor doesn't need to be supplying air for as long as it would do with a smaller gun or a smaller CFM gun, because by its very nature it normally takes longer to do it. So a few things to look out for: it's the tank size and the output. But the output, of all things, the output is most important, because even if you've got a small tank compressor with a big output, although the compressor will be running all the time, it will supply that gun, so you won't actually have a problem. But I'm trying to get people to steer away from full-size guns and look at what I call MIDI guns. So guns particularly like this, that have a reasonable air consumption. I said about 7.5 CFM. I think the Type C is about 6 CFM, something like that. So it isn't really a huge amount. So a lot of compressors will supply that. Certainly if you've got a reasonable sized tank, say 50 litres or upwards, you will certainly be able to do sort of 2, as I say, the compressor will be running once it kicks back in, but you'll be able to do a few panels without any problem at all. So it's not a huge concern. People get really hung up on compressor size, and even ultimately, if you took it to the end of everything, so you were using a full-size gun that used a huge amount of air, you only needed to keep it running to use 600 millilitres of paint or of clear coat. Normally you'll go through clear coat faster than you will paint. Normally the delivery of clear coat is faster, because if you're anything like me, you'll have it on full fluid because you like it to wet up nice and quick, where it isn't always the case with base coat, because it depends what you're actually doing as to what you want, really. But certainly you're only going to need enough air for 600 millilitres or thereabouts of paint, because then you're going to have to stop. You're either going to have to change the cup over, refill the cup, mix some more material up or whatever. So even if you've got loads to do, you're going to have to take a break, and that will allow the compressor to catch up. You've got somebody helping you, which is often the best way. If you've got a big project to do, especially if the weather's warm and things like that. You'll often find that two people will do it, and that's so that they can meet each other around the other side, so that the clear coat or the paint or whatever stays receptive by the time they've got round the vehicle. But I mean, I don't have any trouble like that because I'm just not doing stuff that's that big. But anyway, going back to the Type C, as I say, I think it's a really good all-rounder for people that are relatively new to painting. And I know a lot of people say, well, they want to spend that money on a gun. Well, not everybody's like that. A lot of people like to get a good quality gun. So if you're doing something like guitars and things like that, that don't have a huge area, but you want a really good finish, then something like this would be ideal. They're not particularly fast, as I said, but you can see the finish it gets off the gun. And this is with a cheap clear coat. It's not a particularly good clear coat. I'm trying to see if I can see those nibs. They're actually on the top at the back. I think I point them out anyway. That was the idea of it, to point them out to you. But otherwise it came out spotlessly clean. So I did have to just denib it, but as I say, for track stuff, it's not too important. But you like to do the best you can, or I like to do the best I can anyway. Yeah, so it gives a good performance. It's got a smaller fan than most of the other guns, and also Meiji say that you should hold it a bit closer. I tend to hold my guns quite close anyway, so I think they say 6 inches or less, obviously not too much less, and I tend to hold it probably about 6 inches anyway, but I would do with the other guns, and they recommended for a slightly longer distance. The HRC logos come out okay. I actually print those off. They're vinyl, so it's white vinyl and then with coloured vinyl over the top, so it does sit slightly proud, but it looks okay, and it's certainly less time consuming than airbrushing, which I have done in the past, but it does consume a lot of time, and there's not always the money in it to do it. But as you can see, the Meiji Finer Force T did a superb job. And they say it's designed for base coats, but it certainly does a great job with clear coat, although it is, as I say, quite slow. Anyway guys, thank you as always for watching the videos, and you keep watching them and I will keep them coming. And if you are enjoying them, maybe think about giving us a like, and why not push that boat right out and give us a subscription. Cheers guys, bye bye.